University of Pretoria is a multi-campus public research university. It is a university that aspires to be internationally competitive and nationally relevant. As a shining example, the Faculty of Economic and Management Sciences has academic and research programs that are proven to consistently conform to the highest of international standards. The faculty has 4 fields of specialization and aims to continuously strengthen its position as a leading institution in these fields through its academic and research excellence. The faculty pledges social integration and is known to be technically well-rounded. But above all, the faculty strives to assure that the market value associated with its degrees will always be of a competitive benefit to its students. In a world that is becoming more competitive by the moment, it is essential that students not only gather the education and skills necessary to perform in the marketplace, they should also receive practical experience that places them in the optimal position to find and keep the right jobs. This is what the departments in the Faculty of Economic and Management Sciences offer. It is the combination of real-world application by working closely with industry partners, along with the cutting-edge academic expertise of the top-rated and internationally recognized lecturers who have a great understanding of the expectations of global and local industries that make the difference. We strive to produce graduates that appreciate the importance of community, entrepreneurial endeavor, and innovative action. EMS graduates are a new generation of future thought leaders who will create jobs and make a positive impact nationally and internationally. Make today matter.
Good afternoon and welcome to this webinar titled, Will We Ever Find Balance Again? Managing Your Well-Being During These Uncertain Times. I'm Alain Nel, the Head of Department of Human Resource Management, and it's my privilege to facilitate today's session. This is a crucial topic for all employees and employers since we are, even after 1 year, still in the grasp of a global pandemic, and we need to navigate work during indefinite, undefined times. Various facets of our lives are being tested because of this pandemic, economically, professionally, socially, and personally. It is natural that we experience what they call COVID fatigue. Sustaining overall well-being is now even more important than before, and we need to understand how to achieve that and how to manage work-life balance during these chaotic times. In some instances, we hear the call, when will we go back to normal? At our recent University of Pretoria Senate conference, Dr. Lisa Coleman, a Senior Vice President for Global Inclusion and Strategic Innovation at the New York University, called it the new different, as opposed to the new normal, since we can't, after this pandemic is finished, go back in totality to what we knew as the previous normal. So how do we manage our well-being and balance during these new different? And that will be the focus of our discussion as well. Dr. Natasha Titus-Winkler will join us remotely from Richards Bay. She will do the introduction of this topic. Dr. Winkler-Titus is an alumnus from University of Pretoria and is currently the president of the Society of Industrial and Organizational Psychology of South Africa. She has 25 years experience in the field of management and HR leadership and recently joined the Stellenbosch Business School as a senior lecturer. With me in the studio, I wish to welcome colleagues from my department who are the panelists for today's discussion. First, Professor Nasima Karim. She is an associate professor in the department and program manager for the Human Resource Management and Labor Relations Master's Program. She's currently also the chair of the Diversity and Inclusion Interest Group at CIOPSA and has vast experience as a researcher and a lecturer in diversity management and identity work. In 2020, she co-edited the first book on diversity management developed for the South African context, and recently she co-authored a book titled Occupational Stress in South African Work Culture, examining the work locus of control of managers. Also with us, and we have Professor Herbert Kanengoni. He is also an associate professor and also the Master's Industrial Psychology Program Manager. He's also an NRF-rated researcher and is interested in various elements of positive organizational behavior, but specifically on how employees use their psychological resources to persevere in stressful work environments and complexities. Last but not least, we have Professor Eileen Kukumur, an associate professor in the department as well, and she's managing the Honours Industrial Psychology program in the department. She's also an NRF-rated researcher and is passionate about understanding the interaction between employees' work and family life and how it influences their career success and or well-being. Now that you know the key players in this webinar, I just wish to share the program outline for this session. First, we will hear from Dr. Winkler Titus, and then the panelists will share their views on this important topic. Thereafter, we will take some questions from the audience. So Dr. Winkler Titus will join us at the end of the session again after we finish our discussion and do the Q&A with the audience members' questions, and then she will conclude the webinar. So first off, we will kick off the session with Dr. Natasha Winkler Titus, who will introduce the topic. Dr. Winkler Titus.
Thank you so much, Professor Nell, and thank you also for the honor to share this platform with such a distinguished panel. University of Pretoria will always be my first home. But let me start by saying that, you know, we talk about the new normal or the new, whatever we phrase it, but my wish is really that we never go back to the old normal. May we use this crisis that we've just been through to propel us toward being better human beings and to do better as leaders. So our topic for today focuses on the idea of wellness. The SA Depression and Anxiety Group reported that the instances of people reporting depression and not feeling able to cope has quadrupled since 2020. The extent of change that has been enforced on people during 2020 was exponential. We went from 4% of South Africans working remotely to almost 40% of formal employment occurring in our households. Zoom reported that their user base went from 10 million to 200 million during lockdown. So experiences of burnout is on the rise. And we know that burnout is less about a reality and more about our perception of an unsustainable workload, perceived lack of control, insufficient reward for the effort, lack of support, and a perceived lack of fairness. Research shows that experiences of wellness is declining, and surprisingly, as much as we think they are better at technology, millennials actually report the highest levels of burnout. And this makes sense because they have less autonomy, lower seniority, greater financial stresses, and feelings of loneliness. So two things have a strong focus in the world right now. Lockdown has accelerated the uptake of technology in all aspects of our lives. And emotional well-being takes center stage in the world of work. Both issues, by the way, are not new. And we have knowledge to guide us through this. On a positive note, Professor Nell, it has spotlighted the role of work and other psychologists in a way that we could not have scripted ourselves. All aspects of challenges or opportunities, be it how we engage better with colleagues, managing workflow, managing performance on a virtual platform, developing talent remotely, etc., is no longer a conversation about process or system, but it goes to the root of neuroscience and psychology of engagement, motivation, personal drive, psychological contract, and wellness. The role and approach taken by work psychologists has adapted with technological advances, insofar the application of technology and artificial intelligence in assessments, coaching, counseling, etc., and creating a greater reach of these services as well. Research and learning extends beyond borders, as we can see with this webinar today. So I think this topic is very relevant and very topical for the time that we are now in, and I really look forward to this engaging sessions and the great insights shared with such an amazing panel. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Winkler Titus, for your introduction. Now I will pose some of the questions to our panelists in the studio to provide more insight about the topic and to provide some ideas of how to manage well-being and also a work-life balance. So the first question, I think I'm going to Professor Karim. I think because of the pandemic, obviously there's new or alternative stressors and demands put on us as workers, employees. So can you mention some of those stressors and demands?
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Nell. So first of all, remote working is something new to a lot of employees. In the past, just before the pandemic, people were working remotely, but it was an individual choice. These days, it's become a forced choice. So people work from home now. And the thing is, one of the things we realize is that there are different levels of self-efficacy. Not everybody is confident in doing their job from their homes. People feel that they don't know the job, they don't really know where they stand within the organization, they don't know how to use certain IT platforms, such as Zoom, MS Teams, and Google Meet. I think our organizations didn't prepare people well enough to use their IT skills and that remotely. Then we also see that there are virtual teams that people have to work in on online platforms and that. And they say that when you are actually within the work environment and you have face-to-face teams, you have more rich interaction. Whereas if you on virtual teams and that, there is a greater a chance of having conflict and lack of communication within those environments. Then we also see that the loneliness within the individual also increases. People become lonely. They feel that, what are my colleagues doing? Are they doing the same thing that I'm doing? Or are they doing something different? And then they don't have that interaction with colleagues. Colleagues are usually busy with other things, and that you can't just call up a colleague and say, can I have a discussion with you, Can I have a chat with you? I'm feeling lonely, I'm feeling depressed, I'm feeling miserable. So those type of interactions take place in the workplace, and it kind of makes a person feel good about themselves, and that element of loneliness diminishes in the workplace. But being alone at home, away from colleagues and that, you kind of feel lonely, and that also affects your mental well-being. And then obviously we have other individual factors such as load shedding. We've had a lot of load shedding and sometimes even power outages. While in a meeting, people just say, oh, I can't attend this meeting because there's load shedding taking place. And people have meetings at odd hours. Sometimes you just start a meeting at 5 o'clock in the evening and go on till 8 o'clock in the evening, and then, it's supper time and you kind of forget and you say, you know what, I'm so exhausted. I don't even have the energy to have supper. So these are things that we didn't experience before when we were in the workplace. And emotionally and psychologically as well, people are fatigued as well as physically, especially with people who have to care for parents or siblings who are ill with the disease, with the COVID disease, and that a lot of people have lost a lot of members of their family. I mean, I've heard about reports where 9 family members at one shot just go, pass on because of COVID and that. So it takes a toll on an individual as well. I mean, I had one student, she said she hasn't received a salary for a few months, and then she decided to rent her house out. And when she decided to rent her house out, the day she moved in with her mother passed on. So, I mean, she's a single working mom, and she hasn't had a salary. There are salary cuts as well, which has led to a lot of emotional trauma in people, and because they can't come out with their meager budgets. So these are all some of the negative impacts of COVID and the lockdown and remote working as well. So people also attend work. The surprising thing I saw in research as well is that people actually attend work when they are ill. I mean, usually when you are ill in that, you stay, at home in bed and that. But people are so dedicated. A lot of people are extremely dedicated to their jobs. So while in bed, they're still attending meetings, obviously off camera now, yes. But we also see that substance abuse has also increased. Like people, if they cannot cope with the demands of online work and that virtual work, and they feel lonely and depressed, then they start abusing substances as well in their homes. And a lot of women and children in that, because of the frustrations at home, they are being abused as well. So that is something that negatively impacts their productivity at work as well. And then the second thing is the pressures from colleagues and staff. Some managers tend to cover for their staff as well, especially when they cannot cope with their workloads, or they don't really know how to do certain things. So a manager will try and train that individual to do the job. But I've heard where managers have told me, we try and train our employees, but the problem is that the employee cannot grasp certain things, being away from the office and that. And then the manager ends up doing all the work, basically. And I've heard of managers working for more than 14 hours a day. There's one particular manager who has worked like for 14 hours a day since last year, March. And today she is actually suffering a lot of physical ailments. So it's accompanied by a lot of psychosomatic illnesses as well. She said she has to undergo an operation because of her arm is sore. She can't use she can't use her arm properly. Her neck is sore. Her back is sore. So the doctor has recommended that she actually go under surgery now because of the work overload and sitting in front of the computer the whole time. And then also people, at work, and that employees are unable to separate their work and non-work activities. You get employees working till 11, 12 in the evenings and that, and people are just calling you up sometimes, and people sending you emails and phoning you up and say, how do we resolve this issue? How do we do this job? Or, please assist me with this task quickly. So these are some of the things that have come out, which has actually made us realize that the mental health of individuals who work remotely is negatively impacted at this point in time.
Thank you so much, Professor Karim. Professor Kukumura, we heard about work and non-work, the challenges there. But obviously there's new challenges. Since the pandemic started last year, we were a few months totally at home. Then we started to come back, then we're back at home, and then that is like a hybrid type of thing. But what's the new challenges we have on a work-life balance perspective?
Yes, thank you, Professor Nel. I think the biggest challenge individuals now face are that they have to share their work environment with their family members. Individuals are struggling to really find a suitable workspace where they can work in their home situation. This is not just finding a physical space like an office or a place where you can work having the equipment, but it's also about finding the mental space where you have undivided time and attention which you can give to your work. And I think this is especially difficult because you have your family members and their needs and responsibilities that you have to attend to. Usually you would go to work and you were able to put your household and your family members on hold for that 8 hours when you are at work. Now you are confronted with your family members during your supposed work time. And I think people are really struggling with that because attending to their needs, it takes a lot of time and it can be very distracting towards their work. I think also the second challenge comes with the change in the routines, in the daily routines, because of the unpredictableness of your family situation. I think what we must tell ourselves is that we are in a transition phase where old work habits have now need to be replaced by new work habits, and this is very difficult if you have to take into account so many variables that is changing. For instance, I'm thinking about the school hours. Sometimes your kids can go to school the whole week. The next week they must go every alternative day. So those changes makes it very difficult for the individuals to schedule their work routines. Especially also with the work environment. Some employers might ask you to work at home, others might ask you to maybe come into the office. So those variables are changing on a daily and a weekly basis, and finding a schedule and keeping to a routine becomes very challenging because sometimes you don't have control over that, and people are really finding that very difficult. I think with regards to employers, it's also difficult for them because they now have to realize that all their workers have unique situations in their family life, and that influences their work. Previously, employers had the luxury where they would know my workers will come to work and they will have dedicated work time. Now they must understand that they are competing with the family responsibilities of their workers. And they have to understand that. And to understand that is very difficult. And sometimes, so it's difficult for the employers to know that all the individuals have different situations. And to understand that takes a lot of time and energy from the employer's side to be able to understand and know all the individuals and their personal circumstances. So I think from the employer's side, that's also a big challenge for them.
Thank you so much, Professor Kukumu. Professor Kanungoni, so we heard about all the challenges, the stressors, the demands, the work-life balance, the type of interferences that's a bit new, also alternative now, but there's obviously new work conditions. So how do we keep our employees in with all these external variables also at play, still motivated and also committed towards their organization, towards their positions?
Thank you, Professor Nell. A lot of very interesting issues have been raised regarding, the difficulties that we have been experiencing for the past due to the new different, as you have mentioned it. So I know when these changes came, we were not prepared. We were just thrown into the deep end, and there was no manual on how we were going to kind of navigate around these new changes. But there are quite a number also of challenges which also employees, both employees and employers, are facing in terms of retaining engagement and also motivation. So these two issues have been topic for discussions, I think, for quite a number of decades now. And now it has become even more complex due to the changes that we are currently experiencing, working in virtual settings, etc., etc. Although several organizations may be expecting to return to the previous settings, but most are kind of trying to capitalize on the changes and to try to find a way of kind of moving forward. So some of the challenges I can highlight, we can go on and on, but I'm just going to highlight a few challenges that we can talk. For example, employers might find it very difficult to reinforce trust. When people are not working in the same physical spaces, it might be different to reinforce trust, because trust now has to be a current where you just have to trust that the employee, on the other hand, is doing their job, and the employer, on the other hand, also is keeping their side of the contract. Then we've got also people strive differently in different settings. So working from home sometimes bring the impression that, no, I have to limit the way I work, etc., etc. And also it might lead to work underload. Yet some people work better when they are under pressure, and some people work better when they are not under pressure, or when there's maybe some degree of pressure. So in that case, that can be a challenge as well, which can also influence engagement or the motivation of employees. Then the lack of social interaction also might be a problem, in as far as we might enjoy the gains that we've achieved from reduced commuting times, and we also the increased degree of flexibility also. Those are the gains that we should capitalize on. But in some instances, that can also lead to lack of interaction and collaboration amongst individuals, because people benefit from that interaction and the support that they get from their colleagues in physical work settings. So, and also another thing also, if I'm to just visit or just to add on to what Dr. Winkler Titus has alluded to regarding the challenges as well. When people wake up every day, they have got purpose to execute something. I'm going to help someone, or I'm going to do something that is going to impact someone's life. So we might experience, especially among a lot of individuals, a decline in the purpose Why am I waking up every day? And what am I doing? Is it going to help the other person at the end? Because some people sometimes rely on external validation from clients, from colleagues, from their managers, etc. So that might be an issue. If a person does something, then they feel that no, their efforts are not, are not receiving that external validation. So it's something that might be problematic and lead to a decrease in engagement or motivation. Sometimes do I have to do something? Do I have to go out of the way if I don't know how the person is going to react? So those are some of the issues that both employees and employers are experiencing. Then also, there might be a decline in the potential due to the lack of transparency, and visibility. So the potential of people, like I said previously, some people, its potential is aided by either their colleagues, the physical spaces, the resources, the support they get from their employers. So it might be difficult for people to receive that support if they are working from home. So these are some of the challenges that employees are experiencing in terms of retaining that engagement and motivation in their day-to-day execution of the duties. And also one other thing is the lack of recognition. Some people might feel all the effort that I'm putting whilst I'm working from home is not receiving the expected recognition that I expect from my employer and all that. And also we can talk about from the employer side, they might not have that control of the work settings in which each and every person is working. In as much or as they might want to assist the employees, they might not be able to do so to the expectation of the employees. So I think in a nutshell,
Yes.
yeah.
Thank you so much, Professor Kanungani. Can I maybe just ask a follow-up question?
Yes, yes.
You mentioned about the build of trust in this new type of environment we're working under. What will you suggest can employers and employees do to rebuild that trust?
Yeah, it's a tricky question, but in most cases, engagement in various channels, because sometimes a person might feel, and also that continuous support and validation and recognition of the impact or recognition of what the people will be doing. There are different ways of encouraging the people so that they remain engaged. So employers need to play their part from the side of offering that support and continuous recognition. It might be virtual meetings which can be done, and mentioning, the achievements which the people are, amongst their individuals and all that. And that can also be posted online. They can be posted on the company websites and all that, so that it stays there, and visitors as well as colleagues can see. So they can get that external validation.
Great. Thank you so much, Professor Kanungani. So maybe back to Professor Kukumur. So we heard about all the challenges, but what alternative or strategies are there for you to get the balance back?
Yeah, so thank you, Prof. Nel. I mentioned that people are struggling with finding the workspace and then also finding the routine. So I think the key here will be to try to control what you can control. So what can I control? I can control to some degree my family situation and understanding my family situation. And then if you understand your family situation and the unique situation where you are in, you are able maybe, or it's important for you to identify and determine what will be my ideal work time. When will be the time that I can find work where or time when I can have dedicated work? I'm thinking, if you know that one of the biggest distractions in your household is your children, then I think finding the time when they are not there, maybe in school or when they are sleeping, and then try to focus your work and manage your schedule around that. But so when you find the time that you have worked or you find your ideal work time, I think what's also crucial then is to make the best of the time. Try to prioritize the tasks. Don't waste your time. Be efficient and productive because you have limited time to do the work. And one way there will, or what's important is to set realistic work goals for yourself. I think this is very important. Do not overcommit and then underdeliver. Because Dr. Herbert was talking about the trust. And if you overcommit towards work and you underdeliver, that breaks the trust between you and your employer. So I think in terms of that, renegotiate, given your family situation and the responsibilities you have, renegotiate your workload with your line managers in order for you to be able to still produce within your certain time that you have. I think there's also, from the employer side, aspects which employers can attend to. I think the one I mentioned is, so the employer has to understand that you have a family situation and everyone is unique. So they have to kind of go into renegotiating your task loads and your workload given your situation. But again, from the employer side, remember, you have an objective. The organization has an objective. So in line with that, determine what are the core functions and then renegotiate the workload with your individuals. But then if you have renegotiated the new task loads, I think as employers you also have to respect the time of your employees. You have to understand that they have a lot of family demands and their time is very limited. So in that sense, I think using your online meetings very sparingly. Don't fall into the trap of making online meetings a way for you to micromanage your employees. Rather, trust them. Again, the thing of trust. Trust them to deliver after you've negotiated with them the specific load that they said they will be able to take given their situation. I think Prof. Karim also mentioned it, and that is that people tend to become isolated and feel alone. So in that sense, I think also from the employer side, it's important to encourage social interaction and bonding and to show personal interest. And then so also to keep them informed. People become very anxious if they don't know what's going on in the company, especially now that you're not physically there. So you can kind of feel, I don't know what's going on anymore. So keeping your employees informed is definitely also something that the employer can do. But I think the key is just to understand and to show empathy and understanding that the individual with a family life and a situation which is now intertwined with their workday is very challenging for the employee, and don't dismiss the effect of that.
Thank you so much, Professor Kukumu. I think maybe we should go towards the well-being part. So, Professor Kanengoni, what is meant with workplace ill health? And with the new different, how did it affect employees and employers?
Thank you again, Prof. Nel. When it comes to workplace ill health or work-related illness, these are illnesses which are caused or made worse. It can not only be caused, but sometimes it will be existing, but it can be made worse by your job. So, in a nutshell, there are different types of illnesses. For example, we've got physical ill health, and we've got also, the mental ill health. This also can be caused or can be exacerbated by your job. And it's also worrisome during these COVID times because, people the challenges you have been mentioned that people are working sometimes over long hours, and which can also exacerbate these illnesses. So in terms of how these are affecting both employees and employers, there are various ways in which ill health also derails the smooth flow of production. It also affects on the organizational side, and that also influences the cost. If production decreases, the costs also are affected. Workplace ill health also leads to occupational illnesses, and these increases healthcare costs. These increase healthcare costs as people are working overtime, and may lead also to burnout and stress, which may lead to depression. So these are some of the challenges which are associated with workplace ill health on both the employee and the organizational side. And some of the challenges also which are caused by this is associated with the way in which what goes this new different. It's also some of the ways in which this has affected both employees and employers is that ill health sometimes may lead to legislative fines or costs. Because most of the people are always online. Sometimes they might not know how to distinguish between, saying something in their personal capacity as well as saying something in the company's capacity. So we have seen a rise in number of fines, a decrease in clients due to how the people conduct themselves online, and sometimes leading to lawsuits and all that. And also, I'm just going to the second question that you asked about how this new different has affected both employers and employees, is that it has become very difficult for organizations to manage the, the work environment itself, the psychological climate, the organizational climate, and the organizational cultures. So it has become very difficult for organizations to manage those because, with virtual settings and with people working from home, it has posed the challenges on also issues such as the socialization of new employees because, everything is happening online from interviews, the onboarding process and all that. So, yeah.
That is understandable. So maybe I can just move towards occupational stress. Professor Karim, you recently published or co-authored a book on occupational stress amongst managers. So what is meant with occupational stress and how is it different from the rest of the workplace well-being?
Okay, thank you, Professor Nell. Occupational stress basically focuses on the pressures and the challenges within a particular position. So let me give you a practical example of what I mean by that. A manager, for example, has a lot of things to do. They have admin work to do. They have to manage a department. Sometimes they have to manage more than one department in that. So they kind of stresses within their particular position and their pressures much more maybe compared to an administrative staff. An administrative staff might have to do certain capturing of data, and when it comes to the end of the day, they are done with their jobs. But I don't say all admin personnel have the same type of pressures. For example, if we take the university, those dealing with university students and that, the administrators have a lot more pressure because sometimes the students call them late in the evenings, they send them emails and that. You see they are working right through their leave periods and that. So I would say it depends on what type of position you are occupying and the amount of support that you get from the manager, the environment that you are working in. That focuses on occupational, all those elements focus on occupational stress, the stresses that you get on a daily basis related to your task and your responsibilities in the job pressure. And then the different types of well-being, the different types of other pressures that you can get is that now that a lot of us are going back to work in that, and many people, many employees are not working remotely, and this has happened in the past as well. We take our own identities into the workplace. Each of us has a different identity, individual identity. So identities relate to your culture, your ethnicity, your belief systems, your values, whether your race, your gender, and those are the type of identities that we take into the workplace. And when we get into the workplace and we deal with different individuals, with colleagues, we have these differences, and sometimes people don't understand where you come from. So when you take all these different personalities into the organization and you try and reach an understanding of individual employees, of your colleagues in that, that also places people under a lot of stress as well. And during the pandemic, people have gone through a lot of trauma. Certain people have gone through a lot of trauma in their personal lives. So they come into the workplace, but they are not 100% focused on their work. And sometimes colleagues have to assist them in getting through the day in that. And these are challenges that people need to take cognizance of. If there's a wellness, for example, a wellness center, they need to be sent there. And it should not be something that is stigmatized. You shouldn't be stigmatized if you are going to a wellness center. You should actually be assisted. And then there are obviously colleagues who just kind of disappeared off the radar as well. Kind of invisible employees, you know, every time you contact them and that, they don't answer your emails, they just kind of disappeared in that. Then other people have to obviously carry their burden as well within the workplace. So that also creates a lot of challenges for colleagues within the workplace, and they wonder, where is this person? I mean, I've heard stories where people say that, you know what, we give this particular individual data for the month to do their job in it, and within 2 weeks, that data is already up. What is the person doing? And then when you really investigate it, and that people, you know, some people thought, okay, this COVID lockdown and working remotely is just a holiday period, you know, and they just kind of watch movies and take it easy, whereas other people are really putting extra effort into their jobs. So those are some of the different types of organizational challenges that we do have right now, and we will have in the future as well.
Definitely. Thank you, Professor Karim. I think maybe to go back to the balance, the work-life balance. Because we talked about the stress, the well-being, the ill health, the occupational stress. So why is balance so important to retain health or well-being?
Yes, thank you, Prof. Nel. I think people tend to think that you have to have equal amount of energy or spend equal amount of energy into all the different parts of your life. And because of that, they try to juggle that, and then they end up burning their candle on both ends. And in the long run, that can have a definitely adverse effect. So I think what you need to understand is it should not become to that point where one part overwhelms the other part in your other parts of your life to such a degree that you can't maintain a healthy mental health. So when will that be? If you have a specific part of your life which you prioritize and you don't get time for that, then it becomes a problem. I can explain this using the conservation of resources theory, which says that for every individual, you have a certain amount of time, energy, and resources, which you then invest in the various parts of your life. So if you invest all your time and energy in a specific part, it means that you have to your disposal less energy for the other part of your life. And so I think what's important here is not about thinking that balance is that work and personal life will be equal, but it's about understanding and prioritizing which specific part in my life is important for me, and then to spend your time and energy into that specific part. And I think that is a new way of thinking about the balance. So it's not about equal time and energy spent in all, but more on what do you spend your time and energy. Do what is important for you.
Make sure you spend on the right things. Yes. Great. Thank you so much. Then I would just like to ask Professor Kanangani, what can organizations do? What can the companies do to make sure overall ill health are retained during these times? To make sure their colleagues, their employees are taken care of pertaining to well-being?
Thank you, Prof. Nel. There are quite a number of strategies that organizations can implement to assist employees. I know before the pandemic or before this new work from home arrangements, organizations used to have internal models of employee assistance programs on site. But now with these changes, most have shifted to external models of employee assistance programs. For example, the emphasis has been on telemedicine, telehealth, etc., etc. So, and there are quite a few advantages which are associated with external models. We can talk of confidentiality. We can talk of employees having the flexibility to choose between when which programs to use, and also organizations can also coach because, you know, like I said, we were not given a manual or any standards of how we should navigate through these times. So what do we do? Organization can also can help by coaching on, there are different ways in which they can coach, how the people can conduct themselves, and also how the people can be mindful and also keep engaged. And there are different ways in which people can be taught to be resilient, you know, how to enhance their psychological capital. We could talk about quite a lot. Then open communication as well. The shift from open door policy to open communication is also very important because, you know, in physical settings, people can just knock, you know, and they discuss their issues with the managers. But now there is no that privilege of just knocking. Now we can shift that to open communication where people can have, you know, that ability to reach the manager at any point in time. And also, we can talk about other support systems such as creating buddies or wellness champions around colleagues or within departments. When you know that you've got a problem that is related to this, you've got a person, a go-to person that you can. And also when it comes to technology, organizations can just, you know, nominate or identify people who have got, who can assist other people. Because some people maybe, when you are in physical settings, some people get the assistance from the IT department and everything, but it's not always that people are comfortable reaching out to those departments. So they can have their own go-to guys or technical tech buddies, which can, and this can go a long way in assisting.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Professor Kankhoni. So the next question, we're going to go to the audience questions now. I think that is the most important, that we also involve the audience also in some of the discussion we have here this afternoon. So the first question, the first question is from Eugene Fourie from AMPAF, the company AMPAF. And the question he is asking, which competencies should one develop to be able to cope better during these new different? Can I maybe ask Professor Karim?
Okay, from my perspective, I would say that one of the competencies that you require is resilience. You need to be really resilient during these times. Yes, we are all going through a very difficult period, especially with a second wave of the disease and that. And people have lost a lot of people along the way and that, but you've got to be resilient, you've got to be positive all the time. Because if you are not positive and you just give in to your challenges and the problems, you're definitely not going to help the people around you. You're not going to help your colleagues. You're not going to be able to be productive at work. So resilience, self-efficacy, you need to have confidence in your abilities, the abilities you had at work. Yes, you have now, you know, tried on new things. It's already a year now. You have used different platforms in that. So take that, all those skills and harness it and take it forward within the organization as well. And then the hardiness part comes in as well. You've got to be hardy. You've got to tell yourself, mentally, you've got to talk to yourself every day and say, you know what, I am going to make this work for myself, my family, my colleagues, and the people around me.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. Do you want to add something?
If I can add on to that, besides the, you know, the individual competencies or the personal competencies that the person can have, people can also, you know, develop that habit of continually developing themselves around, you know, technological advances so that they can also increase their skills when it comes to, you know, packages they can use when they're executing, because they are spending most of their time online, so they need to be kind of technologically savvy as well.
Yeah, that's very important, I think, because and especially in certain platforms, there's you Zoom, you have Microsoft Teams, you have Google Meet, we have Blackboard Collaborate. Yeah, yeah. So you have to upskill on all these platforms, because every individual and some companies use different forms of that. But that's the technical skills. Yeah. But what Professor Karim also mentioned a lot is the soft skills. Important, especially to cope with the new environment. You have to be adaptable. So you have to keep your focus, you try to keep your focus while you also have to work as well from home with all the other noises going on externally. So that's very important,
including
to be
time
flexible.
management as well.
Thank you so much. Then there's a very long question from Tamara Nyker. She's from the Telkom group. So I'm going to try to see how do you maintain boundaries when everyone around you is becoming comfortable and acclimatized to a boundaryless organization? So it depends on what your organizational type is. Where being online and on multiple channels like email, Teams, Skype, we just talked about, Skype, Zoom, WhatsApp, simultaneously is the new normal. So some people are more equipped to adapt to these changes. So people was more equipped to work from home and set up their offices and be productive, and others struggled a bit more, obviously pertaining to the external circumstances. So can I maybe... Professor Corrie, will you try to answer?
Okay, how do I'll talk about it from my personal perspective, how do I maintain boundaries? Because it might work differently for different individuals as well, depending on your personality. But I would say that, when people try and call me on a Sunday evening, and that then I usually inform the people within the organization, my students as well, that, there are set boundaries. You call me during this time and that time. And the thing is that, please, after a certain time, it's my family time. I will not be able to take your call. I will not be able to have a Zoom meeting with you and that. But there are instances where you are forced to do it due to circumstances and that as well, where people have... so it can happen that workplace challenges crop up in that, and you've got to have an emergency meeting. So in that case, I think once in a while it's fine, but it can't be done constantly. And I think in terms of maybe I answered one part of your question, but there is another part to this as well, where you don't have to constantly work on your emails or Zoom meetings in it. It's nice just once in a while, if you can and are able to, especially when the lockdown restrictions are not that stringent, then you can pop into the office and just make a date with one of your colleagues and say, I haven't seen you in a long time, They just catch up for half an hour in that, and kind of have their social distancing, but also try and engage in a particular project in that in the office, if you are able to do so.
Yes, thank you so much. I think that is very important. I mean, that is the situation we are in suddenly. I mean, we were in a hard lockdown, totally at the home, but now we have that other provisions we have. And you have to utilize some of those elements in your work ethic as well. So thank you so much for that. Professor Kukumur, maybe I can ask you the next questions from Ashley Uday, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, from the University of Pretoria. One of the challenges of working from home is that the work hours have become longer. We talked a bit about it previously. And it is difficult to separate work and time for yourself. What would you suggest that one balances their work and personal time when you're constantly having the urge to check your emails at all times of the day?
Yes, I think this one is something that I think a lot of people are struggling. I think in the past you were physically able to get away from work and then to detach from your work. But I think now, because your work situation is at home, you are constantly urged with the feeling of, I have to attend to email. So I think one strategy that you can do is to really try they talk about psychological detachment. This is where you engage in activities where you get to the point that you are no longer mentally occupied by your work. I think this is more difficult than you realize, and I think it's also a kind of a cognitive decision that you have to make to engage in activities where you will be required to use your mental capacity, not on work aspects. Personally, I have found, being the mother of 3 children, that if I attend to my children in the afternoon with their school homework, now you must understand I have 3 children all around the table. Everyone wants attention. This one wants a spelling test, this one is reading, that one is doing maths. I have to be mentally so present there to help them. There's no way that I will be thinking about work during that time. And then I psychologically get recuperated from the work because I now invest all my energy and my mental health into something else. And then I found that when I then go back to my work situation, my brain has processed aspects which are then better to work. So I think trying and finding ways in which I psychologically can detach from work. If I can just mention another strategy, I think this is not something new. I think people know this, but they underestimate the effect of that. And that is doing exercises for relaxation. Listening to music, taking a walk, doing an exercise, doing something that you love can also be a way in which you can distract from your work situation.
Great. Thank you so much, Professor Kukumur. I think we will take one last question. It's from Elmarie Fink. She's from the Mediclinic Windhoek. She asked tips to adjust the organizational culture to embrace the new COVID reality. Can I maybe ask a question, Professor Kanangoni?
Yes, thank you. There are various tips that can exist or that can be utilized by organizations. Just to mention a few, organizational culture centers around what how the organization does its things, and this has shifted for some organizations, and so there is continuous need to reassure the employees around that, because when they are working from different settings, it's very difficult for the employer to reinforce, the culture that used to be there, the wording or the words which are used, because some people sometimes identify using the emblem, the logos, the colors and everything, but you wake up every day now, it's a different setting, you're in your own house, but you have to serve the interests of the clients who identify with a certain culture of the organization. So there need to be a shift around that, to embrace, and for employees to be open-minded, and for employers also to be open-minded and realize that this thing is not going away, and we have to capitalize on that to move and shift the culture from maybe face-to-face to blend that with online or virtual settings and all that, and for also the clients to reassure the clients that, okay, we can still provide the same service. The quality of the service is not reduced even if we are serving you online. So that reassurance is needed, and also changing, the way they communicate with their clients, the way people communicate even within organizational settings, though virtual, also needs to be enhanced and continuously adapted. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Professor Kanangoni. Maybe we can take one last question. This is from Sirlene Titus. She's from Discovery Holdings. She's also a previous president from CIOPSA. But she's asking, what shifts have been happening in the science academic world of IUP since COVID-19? Professor Karim.
Okay, yeah, I'll speak about it from an academic perspective. One of the things that have last year been introduced is a lot of our students had to conduct face-to-face interviews in it with their participants to complete their research. But we found that this was impossible. So what they had to do was actually go and find a certain platform like WhatsApp and that to conduct the interviews. So this is one of the challenges that we as academics are facing currently. We have to use a lot of online programs in it to do our research. In terms of the IOPs in it, I think the amount of online assessments in it have increased as well. So I think from that perspective, the IOP fraternity is also experiencing certain challenges in that as well, because more and more we have to do things online. Whereas previously, we used to go into organizations and if there are any issues or challenges within that organization in that, you got that hands-on approach in it. But depending on the level, once again, of the lockdown in that, it's impossible to do that during certain times until these lockdown levels have been more relaxed. So I think we do experience a lot of challenges within our particular occupation and profession. I don't know if my colleagues want to add more to that.
Yeah, I can add. In terms of some of the changes which are happening to the field, despite apart from the the ones which have been mentioned in the academia, the way IOP is executing, or when the strategies that we use and the methods also are changing in practice as well. And also, we can look at the terminologies as well. Most of the things is things like, I could give an example of engagement, burnout, and everything. Those are some of the things which we were regarding as having been over-researched. But now, due to the changes, the terminologies, that changes, and also is calling for people to go back and kind of define those variables, take into consideration the new settings as well.
Yes, I think from an IOP psychologist point of view, I think also there's an increased need for us as psychologists to assist with counseling in the workplace. I think from a psychological point of view, we as workplace psychologists now more than ever has a role to assist individuals and to provide that counseling and facilitation, because people in the workplace will not necessarily go to a clinical psychologist for work-related issues, but the work-related issues and stress, like we've heard before, those are the type of issues that we as psychologists or workplace psychologists can assist employees, helping them with strategies and techniques to overcome that. And I think that is the big role change in terms of our industry and where we can make a difference in this new world of work.
I think that some of the examples you mentioned, it's quite a big, there's a big format for us to actually present our industrial psychology and moving forward. So thank you so much for your perspectives on that. So thank you for your questions from the audience, and also thank you for the panelists for your insights. I also learned a lot. Thank you for that. I now wish to give the screen to Dr. Natasha Winkler-Titus, who will do the conclusion of this webinar. Dr. Winkler-Titus.
Thank you so much, Professor Nel. I must say I feel a little bit overwhelmed. It's quite a daunting effort to try and consolidate and make sense of what has been presented. But I took some notes, and I think there's probably 5 points that I want to leave with the audience. So first of all, what I took out of this was remote working has been forced on us. As I said, it went from 4% to 40%, not by choice. So what we should be careful about, especially as leaders, is that it is not just the remote working that we're dealing with, but this is compounded by other realities that is that the pandemic has forced on us. I also heard about work-life flow and adapting to new schedules and approaches. And again, just want to emphasize that we must remember that we are all in the same storm, but we're not all in the same boat. And therefore, we have to have compassion and understand different contexts people find themselves in. I love the perspectives from Prof. Herbert talking about motivation. And again, humanity has not changed. Human beings are the same. We want the same things. So in terms of motivation, there are creative and innovative ways to still recognize people's effort, to still give them support, give them autonomy and ways to connect and build social capital. That is so important at this time. I recently wrote a blog around how to do performance management, and the emphasis now is to manage output and not manage effort or time spent. I saw one of the comments also coming through. And then also keep communication flowing, and that is not equal to creating Zoom fatigue. You do not have to have a meeting about everything, but make sure you keep the communication flowing. I want to share a little anecdote here. Obviously, as the president at the moment, I'm responsible for the SAABSA team. And at the beginning of my term, I instituted Coffee Fridays. And every morning we have a coffee together and we literally talk about anything and everything. This morning we spoke about Harry and Meghan and the royal saga. And I can promise you, it's been 7-8 months now. I have not had a formal meeting with my team. We only have these coffee sessions, and everything else we chat on WhatsApp. And if anyone has a work-related problem, they call me, we discuss it, and we resolve it. And that's just one example. I also saw a beautiful comment coming through from somebody that said, and now I can't even read my own handwriting. There's a lot of emphasis at the moment, especially when it comes to work-life balance and challenges around family and children responsibility. And oftentimes, being somebody that don't have kids, I also feel that there's an almost bigger influence or impact on those that do not have family responsibilities, because we are worse, where Eileen can switch off and pay attention to her kids. We have no excuse, so we tend to stay behind the screen even longer. So we have to make an extra effort to make sure we unlock, we disconnect, and get away and find healthy outlets. This next point that came out strongly out of the panel was also around individual accountability for well-being. We talk a lot about the employer responsibility, but this whole new way of being and working is putting the autonomy back into our own hands, where we need to learn to prioritize. We need to learn to focus. There was a question around balancing and multitasking, and we know that neuroscience has taught us we cannot multitask. And how many times have we been guilty where we sit in a meeting on Zoom, but you're also checking mail and you're also looking at WhatsApps and you're also responding. You are not present in any of those situations. So we have to learn to focus and be mindful. And when you're busy with the report, shut off everything else and just focus on that. Know what you can control and embrace that. And one thing that I also picked up was be careful of FOMO. I love the slang that the young people use. FOMO is a fear of missing out. So we check every mail, we check every WhatsApp because we don't want to miss anything. We need to learn to let it go. Elsa says, let it go. And then lastly, what I'm also picking up is, as Prof. Herman just shared, organizational responsibility toward wellness and employee engagement. There's a lot of positives that this has brought out. There are definitely new approaches that we can take. During lockdown, I spent a lot of time doing counseling online, and I've actually found that it works much better. And there's research coming out now that show that online platforms for counseling sessions and therapeutic sessions are actually starting to show very positive results. I've also found that the reach is greater. Our MBA students do coaching sessions with us, and where somebody can just move away from his office, dial in and have an hour coaching session with me. In the past, they had to take time, drive on campus. So it took 2 to 3 hours out of their day to have a 1 hour coaching session. I've seen organizations being really creative. I did some work with a Brole Property Group, where during the pandemic, they would have these engagement sessions. And the one session the CEO asked me to be part of is what he called a power up. And he had a psychologist doing a 10-minute mindfulness exercise. And he had a comedian doing a 10-minute slant. And it was just a fun, energizing session. I also did some work with a government department that celebrated Women's Day. And on that session that we had, on the platform, we had 400 people participating, where in the past, in the physical space, they would never be able to accommodate 400 people. So it is definitely creating more opportunities for organizations. And in closing, in his latest book, Gary Hamel refers to organizations that start with employee as humanocracies, diverging from the worldview and belief that people are resources. So being distinctly human at the core is not just a different way of thinking and acting for organizations, but a different way of being that approaches every question, every issue, and every decision from a human angle first. It's the fusion of profit-making and revenue growth anchored in a set of human principles, such as purpose, meaning, ethics, and fairness. This means integrating economic and social value by being market-driven, and purpose-led, keeping in mind that both employees and the network of stakeholders that the business has the ability to impact. Work psychologists, people practitioners, behavioral specialists, researchers, academic, business leaders, and line managers all play an important role in creating humane workplaces and positioning themselves as trusted guides for this process. For us at SIOPSA, we ask, how do we rehumanize work, going beyond the symptoms of burnout? The science guides us, and I leave you with the following. Let's make compassion our lens when we consider others. The word sawubona translates into I see you. So let's see people and ensure everyone feel that they matter. Let us come together with compassion at the core toward rehumanizing not just work, but our workplaces, whether in person or in the virtual world. Thanks so much, Professor Nell.
Thank you so much, Dr. Winkler-Todjes. That's an excellent conclusion to this webinar. A special thank you to the panelists for providing their expertise. And thank you for the audience for watching. It's especially very important. We're still in the pandemic, so we still have to keep safe and keep healthy and to make sure we can also enhance our well-being as we go move forward. So keep safe, healthy, and thank you for tuning in. Thank you.